Shift your gaze to the great seal of the nation. The bald eagle still spreads its wings with fierce dignity, but the symbols clutched in its talons tell a different story. Gone are the arrows of war, and even the olive branch of diplomatic peace. In their place, a scroll, weathered yet revered, inscribed with the enduring words of Plato's Republic. Not a museum artifact, or a dusty reference from Philosophy 101, but a living document. Citizens quote it in conversations. Children study it in schools. It serves as both a constitution and a compass, guiding the nation not toward conquest or capital, but toward contemplation and character. In this world, political engagement is not a noisy battleground of mudslinging and misinformation. The culture of public discourse has undergone a renaissance. Morning talk shows don't compete for outrage. They orchestrate Socratic symposia, where hosts and guests explore the deeper truths behind everyday dilemmas. Town halls resemble ancient Athenian agoras, where citizens and statesmen alike trade syllogisms instead of slogans. To run for office is to submit oneself to the rigorous standards of elite, the pursuit of excellence in moral character. Debates are judged not by who yells the loudest or interrupts the most, but by who best embodies logos, ethos, and pathos, the sacred triad of persuasion rooted in truth, integrity, and empathy. Here, campaigns don't rely on fear-mongering or caricature. They unfold as philosophical treatises, unfolding visions of society as articulated through ethical reasoning. Voters choose not between lesser evils, but between compelling visions of justice. Every vote cast is a quiet echo of a dialogue that began in the shadow of the Acropolis, and now finds new life beneath the marble spires of a reimagined capital. In this world, democracy isn't just a system, it's a philosophy, lived daily. Today marks the beginning of a different kind of odyssey. Not one charted on ancient scrolls or bound to the confines of dusty academic halls, but a voyage of the imagination that reshapes the very course of human history. We are not merely asking, what if, we are daring to reconstruct civilization itself. Imagine, not a minor divergence in the timeline, but a fundamental rewrite. What if the cultural bedrock of the Western world, ancient Greece, had reached beyond its narrow Aegean boundaries and set sail into the unknown expanse of the Atlantic? This is not just a story of travel or conquest. This is metamorphosis. A philosophical seed transplanted across oceans. A shift so profound that the echoes of the Greek agora ring not just in Europe's old capitals, but in landscapes dotted with towering redwoods, open plains, and mighty river systems, uncharted, untamed, and yet ripe for ideas to flourish. The analytical genius of Aristotle meets the mathematical mastery of the Maya. The mechanical cunning of Archimedes finds fertile ground alongside the complex agricultural systems of indigenous America. The wisdom of Athens does not die out, it spreads, adapts, evolves. The result? A world reborn. A civilization that doesn't decline with the weight of its own contradictions, but instead transcends its origins. A marble-clad rebirth of human reason, civic virtue, and technological brilliance, set not in the Mediterranean's warm embrace, but across vast and verdant lands that history never gave the Greeks a chance to know. In this reimagined past, the torch of Hellenic thought never flickers out. Instead, it crosses oceans and sets new horizons alight with its golden fire. Now, let us rewind. It is 330 BCE. The known world shakes beneath the iron tread of Alexander the Great. His campaigns blaze across continents, conquering not only kingdoms but imaginations. From the deserts of Egypt to the mountain passes of Afghanistan, his empire stretches like a stitched tapestry of cultures. But while the East burns bright with victory, the West grows dim with discontent. Back in Athens, the city once hailed as the cradle of democracy and the forge of free thought, the mood darkens. Soldiers now outnumber scholars in the streets. Philosophy is drowned out by the clamor of politics, power plays, and populism. The ideals once sung by poets and etched by stonemasons feel like relics of a fading dream. Amid this discord, something unexpected stirs. Not a rebellion of swords, but of minds. In the shadows of the Acropolis, in the gardens once graced by Socrates' footsteps, a quiet revolution begins. A new faction, composed of disillusioned philosophers, radical mathematicians, visionaries, and artisans, gathers with a singular purpose, not to restore the Athens that was, but to build the Athens that could be. They believe that the world's future need not be tethered to imperial ambition. They look not to the east, as Alexander does, but west, into the uncharted waters beyond the Pillars of Hercules. To these thinkers, the future isn't held in conquest, but in creation, in fusion, in a second founding of Hellenic civilization. One that refuses to repeat the mistakes of militarism and oligarchy. One that carries forward the torch of knowledge into lands unknown, where it might burn brighter than ever before. Thus begins the stirring of a new chapter in the human story, one not yet written, but full of boundless possibility. From the shadows of a fading empire emerges a light not of conquest, but of renaissance. This is no ordinary expedition. It is not fueled by the thirst for gold or dominion, but by a deeper, quieter yearning to preserve the soul of a civilization teetering on the edge of its own contradictions. They gather not as mercenaries or colonizers, but as kindred spirits, thinkers, dreamers, doers. An unlikely fellowship bound together by a belief that the collapse of a golden age need not mean its death. There are philosophers whose minds once danced in the Lyceum's shaded courtyards, eyes still burning with Aristotle's lessons. There are seasoned Cretan sailors, whose families have read the stars for generations, and who whisper of Phoenician ghost ships and ancient rumors of far-off lands bathed in eternal sun. There are engineers from Rhodes, who once helped build siege engines, but now long to craft aqueducts that sing rather than conquer. Scribes from Alexandria join them, tired of transcribing war decrees and longing instead to script a new chapter for humankind. Their unifying force: curiosity. A deep belief that human potential cannot, and must not, be chained to the ruins of political decay. As empires crumble and the drumbeat of war drowns out reason, they make a radical choice: to walk away from the known world. To turn their backs on the marble temples turned into garrisons, and to follow instead the promise of an idea, westward, into myth and mystery. Their instruments are ancient, but their vision is futuristic. Star maps scratched into bronze tablets shimmer, with roots gleaned from Phoenician sailors' half-remembered voyages. Astrolabes trace the arc of Orion and the rise of Sirius. They navigate not by certainty, but by faith in reason itself. The voyage is harrowing. Tempests lash their ships with fury, and the Atlantic reveals itself not as a placid lake, but as a ferocious wilderness of water. Hunger gnaws. Sickness spreads. Doubt creeps in. And yet, they persevere. For theirs is not just a journey of bodies, but of minds. And then, one morning, as light breaks over the sea like molten gold, the cry they've dared not hope for shatters the silence: land. It is no mirage. Before them lies a coastline wild and radiant, unclaimed by Athens or Sparta, untouched by war. Whether it is the emerald edges of Florida, or the sun-kissed cliffs of the Yucatan, history will never be certain. But to them, it is Eden. Palm trees sway like dancers. Rivers shimmer with life. Fruit hangs heavy on branches. The very air seems to vibrate with possibility. They do not see territory to be conquered, they see a blank page. A canvas vast enough to sketch an entirely new vision of civilization. One not rooted in domination, but in integration. Their mission is not to replicate Athens. It is to transcend it. To learn from the land, from the people who already live upon it, from the spirits that whisper in the winds and the rhythms of a world untouched by Hellenic arrogance. Here, they will not build walls. They will build forums. They will not draft battle plans. They will draft philosophies. And they do. Upon the banks of mighty rivers, those we now name the Mississippi, the Rio Grande, the Amazon, marble begins to rise. Not the stark white of Greek quarries, but streaked and vibrant stone, sourced from nearby hills and shaped by hands that know both compass and chisel. These columns are not copies of the Parthenon. They are inventions, fusions of Doric simplicity and native motifs. Spirals inspired by the shells found along the coast. Capitals adorned with glyphs of local meaning. A new aesthetic emerges, one foot in Plato's world, the other in the jungle's lush, breathing mystery. Temples emerge from this meeting of minds and myths. Shrines to Athena stand beside stepped pyramids honoring Kukulkan. Statues of Apollo are carved with feathers and maize motifs, not to supplant the gods of this land, but to honor them in chorus. The air, once filled with prayers in ancient Greek, now carries the blended cadence of languages from across hemispheres. Incense drifts upward in shared ceremonies. Sandalwood from the east, copal from the New World, each smoke trail a tribute to unity, not supremacy. This is not a takeover. It is a tapestry. And it is only the beginning. In this reimagined world, history doesn't echo with the clash of civilizations, it sings with their harmony. The cities they build are living philosophies, designed not just for efficiency but for meaning. Athens of the West thrives as a sanctuary of public discourse, its colonnades lined with mosaics that tell both the tale of Odysseus and the sacred journey of the visioned serpent. New Corinth hums with the bustle of multilingual merchants exchanging obsidian for olive oil, turquoise for parchment, languages weaving together in marketplaces that double as forums of thought. And Poseidonia Nova, a jewel of naval ingenuity, becomes a beacon for cross-oceanic exchange, its harbors dotted with vessels born of both trireme and canoe, capable of navigating rivers and seas alike. But the true revolution is internal. The Greeks arrive not with superiority, but with sincerity. The Socratic method finds kinship in native traditions of storytelling and consensus building. Dialogue becomes the greatest tool, not to persuade, but to understand. Athenian elders marvel at the precision of Mayan mathematics. Indigenous astronomers are stunned by the mechanical models of planetary motion carried from Alexandria. Together, they draft new calendars, plant crops in rhythm with the heavens, and begin to ask questions neither culture had dared alone. What is time? What is soul? What is power, if not shared? In the north, mound builders teach the Greeks to see the land not as property, but as a living presence. Sacred geometries emerge that blend Hellenic symmetry with the spiritual significance of cardinal directions, river flows, and mountain shadows. City planning becomes a sacred act, philosophy with a skyline. And in the south, among the great temples and jungle ruins of what we'd now call Mesoamerica, the Greeks don't try to overwrite the past. They listen. They adapt. Temples are not replaced, they're restored and renamed in both traditions. Athena shares space with Ixal. Apollo with Quetzalcoatl. A new pantheon arises, not in competition, but in convergence. Art becomes the shared soul of this new world. Murals depict Hercules consulting with shamans. Amphorae illustrates stories where Orpheus descends into Xibalba, the Mayan underworld. Poetry flourishes in tongues never meant to meet, yet now inseparable. A new epic emerges, not written by one people, but lived by many. And perhaps most astonishing of all, the children. They grow up bilingual not by decree, but by delight. They solve problems with both Pythagorean logic and indigenous ecological wisdom. They celebrate both solstices and equinoxes with festivals that light the night with fires, flutes, and philosophy. They inherit a world where to be civilized does not mean to be one thing, but many. This is not a utopia. There are still tensions, missteps, conflicts. But they are approached not with conquest, but with counsel. Disputes are settled not by blade, but by reason and ritual. Leadership becomes fluid, held by those most capable of uniting visions, not enforcing them. And so, history shifts, not through force, but through fusion. What began as a flight from collapse becomes the blueprint for a new kind of civilization. One where the old gods are not abandoned, but expanded. One where knowledge is not hoarded, but exchanged. One where myths are not silenced, but sung together. This is the age not of empire, but of enlightenment. In this Greco-futurist Washington, D.C., democracy is not a performance. It is a practice, a daily ritual enshrined in marble and dialogue. The city pulses not with the tension of partisanship, but with the hum of inquiry. The National Agora, once known as the Capitol, sprawls like a great amphitheater, open air and echoing with public debate. Citizens gather not to be ruled, but to participate. The concept of voting has evolved beyond boxes and ballots. It's a process of deliberation, where ideas are tested not by popularity, but by merit, through open forums that merge the rigor of dialectic with the wisdom of lived experience. Surrounding this civic heart, the cityscape follows a sacred geometry. Avenues aligned with solstices and cardinal directions, buildings designed to echo both the Parthenon and the sacred mounds of Cahokia. Museums are temples. Libraries are sanctuaries. Public spaces are sacred groves where artists, philosophers, and scientists co-create the culture, not as elites, but as stewards of shared understanding. Instead of lobbyists lining marbled corridors, philomaths, lovers of wisdom, consult with counselors. Their role: to challenge assumptions, propose ethical implications, and speak for the voiceless, future generations, the environment, the dispossessed. Every new law is passed only after being tested in the ethics chamber, where diverse citizens are selected by lot, an Athenian throwback, to engage in rigorous, transparent debate. Education isn't a system. It's a civic duty. Every citizen, from childhood, is trained not just in math or reading, but in rhetoric, ethics, cosmology, and empathy. The highest aspiration is not to become a billionaire, but a Sophocles, a leader whose authority stems from their capacity to synthesize wisdom across disciplines and cultures. And here's the quiet revolution. This DC is not the center of an empire. It is a node in a network of thoughtful cities across the continent. New Syracuse in the Pacific Northwest, Athens rising where Mexico City once stood, and Atlantis on the Gulf Coast, all bound by a common ideal: that governance is sacred, citizenship is active, and knowledge is our greatest inheritance. The Pentagon. It was never built. Instead, a 5-pillared institute of peace and logic stands in its place, each pillar representing a discipline essential to governance: philosophy, ecology, history, mathematics, and the arts. Within its domes, simulations of conflict are resolved not through war games, but through scenario ethics, deep listening, and intercultural mediation. Global diplomacy happens here, beneath the carved gaze of Athena and the feathered stone of Quetzalcoatl, where wisdom and vision meet. This is not a fantasy, it's a mirror, held up to what might have been and still could be. A world where power is not measured in missiles, but in minds. A capital not of conquest, but of conscience. A democracy, not defended, but cultivated. And in the heart of these libraries, vaulted halls of carved stone and celestial maps, philosopher librarians guide young minds through the tapestry of accumulated wisdom. Knowledge is not hoarded, it is shared, debated, lived. A council of scholars, elected by merit and mentorship, oversees the curation of ideas not to censor, but to cultivate truth and ethical understanding. They are not gatekeepers, they are gardeners of the intellect. Art, too, transcends borders. Sculptors etch stories in obsidian and marble, telling tales where Odysseus sails not to Ithaca, but down the Amazon, encountering gods cloaked in jaguar skins and lessons encoded in myth. Potters in Highland towns craft amphorae, with spiral patterns inspired by both Minoan palaces and Hopi petroglyphs. Music resonates with dual heritages. Pan flutes harmonize with lyres, and festivals are timed by both solstice and equinox, honoring calendars interwoven with mathematics and mysticism. Even time itself is seen differently. The linear chronologies of Greek historians meet the cyclical cosmologies of Maya priests. Together, they craft a layered understanding of time, one that embraces recurrence and revolution as much as progress and cause. History is not merely recorded. It is interpreted, debated, ritually remembered. The political structure of this civilization is no empire. It is a federated commonwealth, where regional councils maintain autonomy, but are bound by a shared constitution, etched in both pictographs and phonetic script, that enshrines mutual respect, environmental stewardship, and the pursuit of wisdom. Every citizen has a place, not merely in law, but in the living story of their culture. Every child is taught not who to obey, but how to think. And as the old world darkens under the weight of feudalism and fear, emissaries from this enlightened hemisphere cross the Atlantic, not to convert or conquer, but to share. They arrive with maps drawn from the stars and stories, medicines made from bark and logic, and scrolls bound in maize paper, inked with a new vision of human potential. Imagine a Europe startled not by steel and smallpox, but by ideas. Imagine cathedrals built with guidance from philosophers who have read both Aristotle and the Popol Vuh. Imagine a Renaissance sparked not in Florence, but in Tenno Athens. Centuries before Da Vinci ever picked up a brush. Because when the foundations of civilization are dialogue, dignity, and discovery, there is no dark age. Only a dawn, spreading from the Americas to the world. And so, in this imagined yet achingly plausible 21st century, you do not walk beneath billboards, but beneath philosopher-poets' verses, etched into travertine walls and whispered in public squares. Instead of scrolling doom feeds, citizens gather, physically, mindfully, to engage in ecclesia novas, digital agoras where every voice is heard, not ranked by virality, but by clarity, compassion, and contribution. Democracy here is not a checkbox once every 4 years. It is a daily habit, practiced in discussion circles, neighborhood forums, and AI-guided civic simulations that allow one to model laws before they are ever enacted. Science and spirituality are not enemies. They walk together like old friends. Astronomers map exoplanets with instruments whose algorithms are based not just on physics, but on principles derived from Aristotle's unmoved mover. Ecologists cite both Gaia and Gaia hypothesis. Sacred groves exist not for nostalgia, but as living laboratories, biospheres of harmony, a tribute to both indigenous stewardship and Greek sacred geometry. Climate is not a crisis to react to. It is a sacred pact, written into the very constitution of this confederation. And women, they are not firsts. They are equals. No one applauds when a woman leads, because she always has. Matrons of medicine, scholars of strategy, engineers of harmony. The balance between masculine and feminine principles is not rhetorical. It is architectural, embedded in the layout of cities, in the structure of decision-making councils, in the language itself, one that never learned to gender dignity. There is no billionaire class. Because there is no billion to hoard. Wealth, here, is measured not by accumulation, but by contribution. A great philosopher may have no land to her name, but her words build futures. Artists are not starving. They are state-supported stewards of culture. Engineers do not patent water purification. They gift it, in the name of a rite, excellence in service of the common good. In this world, death is not feared, but reflected on, taught in schools as part of a philosophical curriculum. Funerals are symposia of remembrance, where eulogies are dialogues, and the dead are honored not with obituaries, but with the continuation of their work. Even prisons are obsolete. In their place are centers of restoration, temples not of punishment, but of perspective, where justice means not revenge, but reconciliation, reason, and renewal. And as the sun sets over this reimagined earth, its last rays cast golden shadows through open-air courtyards and verdant terraces. Not onto flagpoles or fortress walls, but onto faces gathered in dialogue, hands outstretched in agreement or dissent, minds alight with the possibility that truth can be approached, if never quite captured. And that the pursuit of that truth, together, is what makes us more than individuals. It makes us civilization. And so, the ripple of that ancient decision, to set sail westward, to build not empires but alliances of minds and hearts, has rewritten the course of humanity. Not just a different America, but a different humanity. One sculpted not by conquest, but by contemplation. Not by fear, but by wisdom. Not by the will to rule, but by the will to understand. Now it's your turn, imagine it. What would your version of Greek America look like? Would Olympic Games take over Central Park, not just every 4 years, but as a regular fixture of civic life? Would the gymnasium become the cornerstone of our communities, where not only athletes train, but minds sharpen in discourse and philosophy? Maybe Plato's Republic would be required reading in every school, not just as a historical text, but as a living blueprint for the way we govern, think, and engage with the world. Would every city-state be represented by their own philosopher king in the Senate? Or perhaps we'd have our own version of the Elysian Fields, a public square where philosophers debate the meaning of life, love, and justice as citizens gather around, not just to listen, but to participate. What do you think? How would this ancient fusion of philosophy, politics, and science alter the course of history? We love hearing your wildest alternate history ideas. So drop your theories, your what-ifs, and your vision of a Greek-influenced America in the comments below. And if this episode made your mind race, like it did ours, don't forget to smash that like button, hit subscribe, and ring the bell so you never miss a new twist in time. Because here at Timelines Rewritten, the past is never just the past, it's the future waiting to be discovered. And so, the ripple of that ancient decision, to set sail westward, to build not empires but alliances of minds and hearts, has rewritten the course of humanity. Not just a different America, but a different humanity. One sculpted not by conquest, but by contemplation. Not by fear, but by wisdom. Not by the will to rule, but by the will to understand. Now it's your turn, imagine it. What would your version of Greek America look like? Would Olympic Games take over Central Park, not just every 4 years, but as a regular fixture of civic life? Would the gymnasium become the cornerstone of our communities, where not only athletes train, but minds sharpen in discourse and philosophy? Maybe Plato's Republic would be required reading in every school, not just as a historical text, but as a living blueprint for the way we govern, think, and engage with the world. Would every city-state be represented by their own philosopher king in the Senate? Or perhaps we'd have our own version of the Elysian Fields, a public square where philosophers debate the meaning of life, love, and justice as citizens gather around, not just to listen, but to participate. What do you think? How would this ancient fusion of philosophy, politics, and science alter the course of history? We love hearing your wildest alternate history ideas. So drop your theories, your what-ifs, and your vision of a Greek-influenced America in the comments below. And if this episode made your mind race, like it did ours, don't forget to smash that like button, hit subscribe, and ring the bell so you never miss a new twist in time. Because here at Timelines Rewritten, the past is never just the past, it's the future waiting to be discovered. History is more than just dates, wars, and triumphs. It's a complex web of endless possibilities, where every path taken holds the potential for a new world, and every choice not made carries the weight of what could have been. Ancient Greece may never have sailed across the Atlantic, but its legacy, the the love of wisdom, the pursuit of virtue, and the belief in dialogue, has rippled through the ages, leaving an indelible mark on how we think, how we govern, and how we live. And maybe, just maybe, in moments of reflection, we carry a piece of that alternate future inside us. Every time we choose reason over rage, knowledge over noise, we echo the very ideals of a world that could have been, one where philosophy wasn't just an abstract study, but a way of life. So, keep imagining, keep questioning, and most importantly, keep asking. What if? This has been Timelines Rewritten. Thanks for joining us on this epic journey through alternate histories. Don't forget to subscribe for more thought-provoking timelines, and until next time, stay curious.